Students, we are going to discuss today about Southeastern Asia, and particularly we'll discuss about organization ASEAN. ASEAN stands for Association of Southeast Asian Nation. These countries of ASEAN are located eastward from India. First country that comes on our way after crossing India is Myanmar, earlier called as Burma. Then comes Thailand. Adjoining Thailand are three countries of Indochina: Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia or Kampuchea. Below that, you will find on the map Malaysia, and on the tip of that is Singapore. In the neighborhood of Indonesia is Malaysia. Then you will find a small tiny country, East Timor, that was earlier part of Indonesia and got independence from Indonesia. You will also see a group of islands there, Philippines. So on one side you will find Indian Ocean, and on the other side you will see Pacific Ocean. In between these are the member countries of ASEAN, which was one very successful association in 90s. This part of Asia faced colonial exploitation by the Europeans, and after that, during the Second World War, it came under Japanese occupation. After Second World War, again effort was made by previous colonial power to regain their strength, but national movement started in those countries, and one by one they were successful in establishing their independent government. Indochina was in the control of France, but French were defeated, and then Americans tried to occupy. I'm particularly telling you about Vietnam, but in 1975 even American army had to retreat from Vietnam. In Kampuchea and Laos, there was war, civil war, and all that came to an end after lots of effort by Southeast Asian countries. Indonesia was earlier a Dutch colony, and it got freedom. India had supported freedom struggle of Indonesia that is recorded in the history. So this is the colonial past. Before we come to other aspect, I will also like to tell you that Americans were occupying Philippines before Second World War, and during Second World War, Japanese defeated Americans and tried to establish control. Whole of Southeast Asia had gone in the control of Japan. We remember that Subhash Chandra Bose had taken control of Indian National Army at Singapore, and after that, with the help of British Indian Army, he tried to come to Manipur after establishing control on Andaman Islands. So we are aware of this aspect. After these countries became independent, there was a task of nation building before them. Problems were many, like fighting with poverty, There was economic backwardness in the region. Another challenging job was to protect the culture of the region, and above them all, there was pressure on each of these countries to align with big powers, whereas they had decided to be non aligned. I want a student to recall that in 1955, at Bandung Conference, non aligned countries got a foundation stone. India and many Asian African countries were there in Bandung Conference, and they had decided to set up non-aligned movement that came into existence in 1961 at Belgrade in Yugoslavia. However, movement like non-alignment was not much effective in case of these Southeast Asian countries that could not bring peace or development and even cooperation and economic development in this region. That movement could not even ensure interaction among member states. For this, in 1967, 5 countries signed Bangkok Declaration, and they decided to form ASEAN. Full form of ASEAN is Association of Southeast Asian Nations. 5 countries which were founders of ASEAN were Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. It is important to note for us what were the objectives of ASEAN. Primary objective of ASEAN was to accelerate economic growth in Southeast Asia. Secondary factors were to ensure social progress, cultural development, and promote peace in Southeast Asia. Stability is very important for economic progress. So they tried to ensure that. However, they had supported principles of United Nations Charter, and they laid full faith in United Nations objectives. They were committed to ensure and establish rule of law in Southeast Asia. Soon after, new members also joined this association. They were also from Southeast Asia. New members were one small, rich, oil-rich sultanate, that was Brunei. Another one was Darussalam, Vietnam, Laos, PDR, Myanmar, and Cambodia. So number went to 10. Now ASEAN was not a very small organization. Many times we compare ASEAN with European Union. European Union has tried to become supranational structure and developed its institution like European Parliament was developed in Europe. They developed a common flag. Currency euro was developed. However, ASEAN did not develop its own currency. Neither they have a parliament of ASEAN countries. They did not want that. They went for informal discussion. They adopted non-confrontationist and cooperative attitude among the members, and that ensured progress of ASEAN. In 2003, some kind of institutional setup was also ensured by ASEAN countries. They established three pillars. These famous three pillars of ASEAN are ASEAN Security Community, ASEAN Economic Community, and ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. I want to also remind you that in 1994, ASEAN Regional Forum was set up for better coordination on security and foreign policy matters by the ASEAN. So, three pillars and this ASEAN Regional Forum, they try to give some institutional structure to ASEAN. Students, ASEAN is not as big an economy as European Union or even equal to US or equal to Japan even. However, most admirable thing about ASEAN in 90s was that it was fastest growing economy. And it kept on developing itself in an impressive way up to 2000 and even after that. But then we saw emergence of China, and China did commendable work in ensuring economic development, and its growth rate as well as expansion of business and trade of China was much more than that of ASEAN region. However, impressive growth of ASEAN attracted countries like India and China to be part of ASEAN. In one way or other, they wanted to be associated. ASEAN countries created common market and production base. They worked for socio-economic development. Also, they developed dispute settle mechanism to resolve particularly the economic disputes in the region. Dispute settlement mechanism is very important for development in any regional organization. They also succeeded in creating free trade agreement. As a result of it, more investment started coming in ASEAN region. Labor forces came to different countries, and it could give services on a bigger scale. US and China have moved to negotiate free trade agreement with ASEAN that speaks abundantly about the success of free trade agreement in ASEAN region. All this ASEAN could do because of ASEAN Vision 2020. This vision had farsightedness. It took outward-looking role for ASEAN region. It encouraged negotiation over conflict. It mediated end of Cambodian conflict. It ensured independence of East Timor from Indonesia. Because of this East Timor's issue, there was disturbance in Indonesia for a long time. ASEAN meets annually to discuss East Asian cooperation. This ASEAN organization has economic relevance, not only for member countries, but even for China and India. India, although did not enter in ASEAN, but it signed free trade agreement with two member countries of ASEAN, one Singapore and other one was Thailand. Now about strength of ASEAN. ASEAN's strength lies in ensuring interaction among members, going for regular consultation, and developing dialogue with partner states. This is a forum when Asian countries and major powers can come every year and discuss their issues and work for a better coordination among the countries. ASEAN's economy was hailed as a Asian tiger economy. I remember in 90s I had read praises about the progress of ASEAN in Southeast Asia in Times magazine. Although after some time China emerged as a big economic power and no doubt even as a military power, it created its own brands, it expanded its business, and China succeeded in expanding its influence. That we will discuss in other part. But in this part, we had to understand what were the measures that helped ASEAN to grow as a regional organization. What was its vision and what were the objectives that were set up? I hope you have understood how ASEAN region became a successful regional organization. The impressive development of ASEAN region had forced Indian government to think and develop look east policy. So that speaks enough about success story of ASEAN. Thank you.